The kidnapping of President Maduro of Venezuela is another reminder that we still live in a world where if you want peace, you must be prepared for war, so that if X is thinking about nailing you to the cross, your military readiness will be enough to ask X if painfully bleeding on a cross like a Christ is one of their passion. It's like X needs to understand that your country wants peace at all cost and would prefer the diplomatic approach 3 times a day like antibiotics, but it will never shy away from war. In fact, it will happily meet X on the battlefield for a dance, because sometimes war is the only melody imperial powers understand when it comes to peace. Otherwise, in my village, they say, it is out of respect that the mighty African elephant come to destroy your farm in the middle of the night. Because even if they come during the day, what exactly do you think you can do about it? I'll tell you, absolutely nothing. Actually, the bravest thing you can do in that situation is to stand next to your neighbors and watch. Then again, that is me assuming that breathing is still something you think it's worth getting out of bed for every day for the rest of your life. Now, as for international law, forget about it, because that rule book doesn't apply to countries with military might, unless, of course, the name starts with R and ends with A. I mean, it's the only nuclear armed country that has faced all kinds of sanctions from the mighty international community and a United Nations Security Council where only 5 out of more than 190 something countries on earth hold the veto power. Yet, other countries are engaged in the same types of belligerent gunboat diplomacy, but somehow only one gets sanctioned. As for others, their actions were anointed by the gods of land and sea, so there's nothing to see. Now, back to President Maduro. You see, this is a sitting president kidnapped from his own country, Venezuela, by a foreign power and forcibly brought to the US to face charges with his wife for allegedly breaking US law, even though they are neither US citizens, residents, and despite not setting foot on US territory. It's like France sending its special forces to abduct Senegal's president Bassirou Diomaye Faye for having 2 wives because it violates French laws. Look, these days, reality imitates fiction better than fiction ever could. Like, you can't make this up. Now, in this cocktail of charges against President Maduro and abducted heads of state, important to remember, there is drug trafficking. But what really stood out to me was the accusation of possessing machine guns. I mean, for one, he's a president. So I was always under the impression that it was perfectly acceptable for a president to be surrounded by armed security on top of extra security. Also, when you have Uncle Sam breathing down your neck and invading your personal space like a hunting wild beast, no wonder Maduro's paranoia is perfectly justified. I mean, where is he now? The machine guns didn't help. Look, if you ask me, I'd rather see a president who can walk in the streets of his country with just 2 security guards and drive around this country with a convoy of 3 vehicles max. You see, that to me would actually show it's a functioning country with working institutions, public trust, and a legitimate authority. Because these bloated presidential convoys with 40 plus vehicles makes no sense, especially in 2026. I mean, how do you feel insecure around the very people who supposedly voted for you? Makes you wonder, did they really vote for you? Now, I have hypothetical scenario here, but I promise you, your brain will struggle to even work with it, but try, right? Remember in around 2018, 2019, when the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest protest began in France, these were people who were protesting against their president, President Macron, for over a year. Every weekend, they were in the street protesting against President Macron. Now imagine, um, also before I forget, one thing about French people is like the love to protest. I mean, a protest to French people is like what boiled eggs is to Ghanaians. Now, imagine during that protest when the French were protesting, going in the streets, and also keep in mind the only thing that made them stop the protest was when world government came together and told the people to stop going outside. You remember that time. I just don't want to say the thing, these algorithms are very funny. Anyways, now, during that time when the French are protesting, imagine a foreign government, let's say Mali, for example, a great French friend, France's friend. Anyways, so imagine Mali decided to reach out to its own version of the CIA, MI5, all the alphabet groups in the world, and decided to infiltrate the French protest, fund the French protest. And one day we wake up, the French president, we see videos of the French president in Bamako, the capital city of Mali, in a prison in Mali. Just even thinking about it, it doesn't work, because here's what you're thinking. If you understand, the world we live in, they won't just have to deal with the French army. They will also have to deal with a branch of the French army, which is La Légion étrangère, the Foreign Legion. And on top of that, France is also part of NATO. So it's a NATO country. Now, if there is confrontation, it will happen in Mali. So Mali will have to be fighting against all these external forces. It's just not something I think even in the wild imagination they can think of doing. And why? It's because these governments are able to ask other countries if they love bleeding like a Christ on a cross. And that's a question that many countries right now can answer by saying no. And also a good example of that is when during the Cuban Missile Crisis between the USSR, Russia, and the United States, the world came to this close to another, to a nuclear war. But it didn't happen because these are two powerful countries. And the thing with powerful countries is that they usually don't fight because they have a lot to lose. However, countries who don't have much to lose, they would fight each other any day of the week. You see, a strong army, my argument is if your country doesn't have a strong army, you will struggle in the world we live in right now. In fact, the kidnapping of presidents, even the assassination of president, is not anything new. You remember the US did the same thing with Noriega of Panama. Closer, you have Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, NATO forces, the US, the UK, France. You also have Saddam Hussein, and the list goes on, right? And the only reason such things are happening is because they are attacking countries they know do not have the power to respond the way they would. You see? So,
We, ni nini?